Hey everyone, it's Darren. I know I haven't posted anything in a while, and the reason is I've been really busy writing. Two books, in fact. I submitted both manuscripts in the last couple of months, and they have a release date sometime this calendar year. The first one is a memoir and scientific advocacy book. I really want to be part of the conversation to promote science in the United States and especially serve as a motivation for policymakers and congressional staffers and thought leaders to kind of understand what goes on under the hood and how the engine of discovery that is university research takes place, and also to provide tools to students and early career scientific professionals. The other book is a bookification of my YouTube content, and those are tools for students and early career researchers. And the first book, the memoir, is I got permission to read the prologue here, and so if you're interested in this book, go ahead and give me a follow, please. Go ahead and hit subscribe in YouTube so that you can get more news as it comes out. And here it goes. It's called. The book is called Science Nonfiction: Behind the Scenes in University Research. Prologue. "So you're a professor," the immigration officer said. He held up my passport to see if the photo matched my appearance, minus the tousled hair and dark circles under my eyes. It was 6 a.m, and I'd just stepped off a 12-hour flight from Singapore to San Francisco. I was headed back home to San Diego after a week of talks at universities in 3 countries. The officer glanced up from the screen. "What do you teach?" That question always throws me. There's an easy answer: chemical engineering. Then there's the real one. Yes, I teach students about chemistry, engineering, and materials science, but I spend most of my time raising money so that they can do experiments that will most likely fail. I teach undergraduates, PhD students, and postdoctoral researchers how to ask good scientific questions, develop strong written arguments, speak in public, and not lose hope when their manuscripts are rejected by journal editors and unkind reviewers. Chemical engineering usually seems to satisfy airport protocol, so that's what I went with, and the officer waved me through. That exchange, repeated a dozen times in airports, in dentist chairs, and at holiday parties around the world, captures a truth even people close to me never quite grasped. My father, for instance, believed until the day he died that my job consisted of walking into a classroom every morning and lecturing. He'd never been inside a lab, not even mine. He knew I was a professor, he just didn't know what that meant. Most people don't. To the outside world, science is either heroic or hopelessly abstract, a lone genius discovering the cure for something, or a bureaucratic enterprise burning money in the name of curiosity. The truth sits somewhere in between. In a typical lab, discovery happens amid the deafening hiss of overpressurized tanks of liquid nitrogen. Don't worry, it's supposed to do that. And the sickly sweet smell of acetone. Every breakthrough sits on a mountain of discarded pipette tips, rubber gloves, broken glassware, and failed ideas. Progress comes in microns, not miles, and it all takes money. The United States spends roughly $60 billion a year, about 1.2% of the federal budget, on university research, and most of that money doesn't buy machines, it buys time. Time for graduate students and postdoctoral researchers to chase hunches and ask big questions, design experiments to test them, and fix equipment that costs more than their cars. In other words, to learn how to think like scientists. What the public rarely sees is that university research is mostly a human story. The labor of these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idealists fuels an entire knowledge economy, even though their stipends barely cover rent in most coastal university cities. These students and postdoctoral scholars give their 20s and often their 30s to a system that trains them brilliantly while exhausting them completely. Nearly half of all students entering PhD programs don't finish. The system is far from perfect. Universities use students to generate revenue and cachet. Students, for their part, seek certification, a PhD diploma, to convince a future employer to pay them enough to feel secure. Along the way, power dynamics between professors and students can tilt toward exploitation. The traits that make someone good at science, obsession, perfectionism, self-critique, can easily curdle into anxiety or despair. Yet the same environment produces resilience, creativity, and occasionally discoveries that transform entire industries and lives. The line between breakthrough and burnout is as thin as the glass capillary tube all good chemists learn how to make with a blowtorch. The system is riddled with contradictions. Science is expensive, yet the median salary for the people who do most of the work is less than $40,000. There is a fair case to be made that the financial burden of research is borne not by the taxpayer, but by the forever trainee, the 22-year-old PhD student who becomes a postdoctoral scholar at 29 and then an untenured research scientist at 34. These individuals earn a fraction of those with MBAs and JDs, degrees that took much less time to obtain than PhDs and postdoctoral training. They make other sacrifices as well, such as foregoing the investment interest early in adulthood that leads to a comfortable retirement. Time in the lab, 80 hours a week or more, combined with financial insecurity means that researchers start families later in life. The stress PhD students experience leads to significant attrition among them. Asymmetric power relationships, sometimes between students and their advisors, i.e., professors, can lead to abuse. For all these reasons, it is unsurprising that 50% of graduate student researchers seek treatment for anxiety and depression, a rate much higher than the general population. Still, I believe in the enterprise. Nearly every technology that defines modern life, next-generation semiconductors, the internet, life-saving vaccines and anti-cancer therapeutics, CRISPR gene editing, solar panels, lithium-ion batteries for electric cars and energy independence, and GLP-1 drugs for diabetes and weight loss, had its basis in university labs. When the system works, it's invisible. You only notice it when it fails. Or, possibly, when a politician decides to score points by calling research woke or wasteful. This happened with one of my own grants for developing a device to help throat cancer patients recover their ability to swallow. It was signaled out by a Senate committee as Marxist because a tiny fraction of the budget, as required by the rules of the program, was allocated to outreach. Now funding for these purposes has an uncertain future. The politics, the bureaucracy, the rankings, all of it can make the university feel less like an ivory tower and more like an industrial park. But I've also seen the other side. For example, a graduate student's first successful experiment after months of failure, or the quiet triumph of a kid who grew up poor and became an addict, got clean, earned a PhD, and is inventing America's future at a big company, and earning much more money than I do. Those moments remind me of why I stay. The system may be messy, but it remains one of society's best inventions. Public money invested in some of its most curious, tenacious people. My 6-year-old daughter recently asked me if time travel is possible. In a way, yes. A university research lab, though it runs on a shoestring budget, offers a sneak peek of the future most people won't see for decades. My own journey through that world has been long and circuitous. It began in a working-class family outside of Rochester, New York. My journey wound through Boston University, Harvard, Stanford, and UC San Diego, and eventually carried me back home to the University of Rochester. Along the way, I've been the overworked graduate student, the idealistic postdoc, and the new professor. I have been the careful steward of around $10 million in public funding. I've been a classroom instructor, a laboratory director, and a mentor to students who founded 3 companies. I've worked deep in both the defense academic industrial complex and the diversity, equity, inclusion milieu, and received an award from the White House signed by President Trump, of all people. I served as the Associate Dean for Students at the largest engineering school on the West Coast. I've been persistent and profoundly lucky. At Rochester, I'm the department chair of a storied but newly reborn Department of Chemical and Sustainability Engineering, trying to keep the next generation of students and faculty from losing hope as it faces an uncertain financial future. I've seen science at its most inspiring and its most absurd. This book is about that world, the people who make discoveries happen and what the process does to them. It's about their ambition and anxieties. From arrhythmias to hyperhidrosis to lockjaw, I've had them all. It's also about what I've learned after 20 years inside the machine, that science is as human as any art, that universities are held together less by policy than by decency, and that progress in the end depends on ordinary people doing extraordinary amounts of work. The habits that shaped that life, curiosity, persistence, a tolerance for failure, didn't begin in a lab. They started long before I knew what a grant or publication was, in a small town in western New York. There, I built solar cells that leaked battery acid and messed with the source code of games that came with Windows 3.1 just to see how they worked. To explain the present, I have to go back to the village of Hilton, where the road to academia began with Lego blocks on the floor, Star Trek on TV, and the beeps and whir of a 1980 desktop computer.